The CEO's voice dripped with disbelief. A highly skilled engineer had been let go. But 2 weeks later, his former boss came back, begging him to return. What happened? What did he do that turned the entire company upside down? Ethan Collins had given 30 years of his life to Hanover Auto Works. A master mechanic, he had built a reputation as the man who could diagnose an engine's problem just by listening to it run. His hands, calloused from decades of work, had saved thousands of vehicles from being scrapped. Customers didn't just come to Hanover Auto Works for repairs. They came for Ethan. But to Ryan Hanover, the new owner, Ethan was nothing more than an aging worker slowing down operations. The day Ryan fired him, the shop felt colder than usual. Ethan had been under a truck, tightening a bolt, when Ryan's sharp voice cut through the air. "Ethan, we need to talk." Wiping grease from his hands, Ethan stood, his gut already telling him this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. Ryan held a clipboard, his eyes scanning over numbers, not even looking Ethan in the face. "Your repair times are slower than the younger guys. We need efficiency, not nostalgia. It's time for you to move on." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He had been here longer than most of the tools in the shop. He had trained half the mechanics working there. But Ryan wasn't interested in history. Ethan swallowed hard, nodded once, and turned away. If there was one thing he had learned in 3 decades of fixing engines, it was to leave a broken machine before it dragged you down with it. Packing up his toolbox was the hardest part. His workspace was filled with stickers from auto shows, faded photographs of him with Henry Hanover, the man who had given him his first real job. Ethan had started at Hanover Auto Works as a kid with nowhere to go, sweeping floors, learning by watching, earning his place one wrench turn at a time. Henry had treated him like family, teaching him not just how to fix cars, but how to take pride in his work. And now his son was throwing him away like an outdated part. Word spread fast. By the time Ethan had carried his last box to his truck, half the town knew. Customers who had trusted only him for their classic restorations were furious. The local auto enthusiast club, a group of longtime clients, immediately pulled their business. Mechanics he had trained watched in silent anger as their mentor walked out for the last time. But Ryan didn't care. He had a new vision for Hanover Auto Works. Faster turnaround, lower costs, more profit. What he didn't understand was that a shop was more than just numbers. It was trust. And trust wasn't something that could be bought. Ethan sat in his truck outside the shop for a long moment, staring at the building that had been his home for 3 decades. The familiar scent of motor oil and steel clung to his clothes. He had sacrificed weekends, late nights, time with his family for this place, and now it was gone. He took a deep breath, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. Without looking back, he pulled away from Hanover Auto Works, the only job he had ever known. He didn't realize that 2 weeks later, that same shop would be on the verge of collapse. And when Ryan came knocking on his door, begging him to return, Ethan would have a choice to make, one that would change everything. Ryan Hanover had a plan. The day he took over his father's shop, he saw Hanover Auto Works not as a place built on loyalty and craftsmanship, but as a business with outdated methods. In his eyes, efficiency was king. If cutting repair times by 30% meant higher profits, then that was the future. And if that meant letting go of old habits and old mechanics, so be it. The changes came swiftly. Digital timers were installed in every bay, tracking how long each job took. Mechanics were given quotas, 5 repairs per day, minimum. Quality inspections, once the hallmark of Hanover Auto Works, were now deemed optional, something to be done only if there was extra time. Ethan saw it all happening in real time. The younger mechanics, eager to impress, followed orders without question, moving from one job to the next like an assembly line. But they didn't know what to look for, the small signs of trouble that came with experience. The sound of a timing belt just slightly off. The faint scent of burning oil that signaled an issue beyond the obvious fix. Ethan had spent decades catching those mistakes before they became costly. Now, those details were ignored in favor of speed. One afternoon, he watched as a 19-year-old technician, barely a year out of trade school, struggled with a transmission rebuild. The kid was rushing, sweat beading at his temples as he fought to finish in time. Ethan stepped in, ready to offer guidance, but before he could say a word, Ryan's voice cut across the shop floor. "Ethan, let him work. We don't have time for lectures." Ethan turned to face him, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. "It's not a lecture. He's about to miss a seal that's going to cause a leak within a week." Ryan folded his arms. "Then he'll fix it when it comes back. More repairs, more money." Ethan stared at him, stunned. "That's not how we do things." "That's how we do them now," Ryan said firmly. "This isn't a school, Ethan. It's a business." Ethan shook his head. "A bad repair isn't just a mistake, Ryan. It's a liability. You send someone out in a faulty car, and they could end up in a wreck. We're not just fixing machines. We're responsible for the people driving them." Ryan's jaw tensed. "And I'm responsible for keeping this shop running. We can't afford to waste time on overcomplicated repairs. If you can't keep up with the way things are now, maybe you don't belong here anymore." Silence spread across the shop floor. The younger mechanics, sensing something bigger than an argument, paused their work. Even the office staff in the front glanced toward the garage, their conversations quieting. Ethan took a breath, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Henry Hanover built this place on trust. Customers came here because they knew we wouldn't cut corners. You throw that away, and you're not running Hanover Auto Works, you're running a factory." Ryan's face hardened. "That's enough. Pack up your things, Ethan. You're done here." For the first time in his life, Ethan found himself frozen, unsure of how to respond. He had been here longer than most of the tools in the shop. He had trained half the men standing around them. His fingerprints were on every inch of this place. But Ryan was the boss now. Ethan exhaled slowly, glancing around one last time at the shop that had been his home for 30 years. Then, without another word, he walked to his station, grabbed his toolbox, and began packing. The shop remained eerily silent as he worked. No one moved. No one spoke. Even Ryan, standing rigid by the office door, didn't say anything more. The sound of tools clinking against metal was the only noise that filled the room. By the time Ethan lifted his box and walked toward the exit, some of the younger mechanics lowered their heads, ashamed. Others, the ones he had trained personally, looked on in quiet anger. They wanted to speak, to argue, to protest, but they knew it wouldn't change anything. At the door, Ethan paused. He turned, his gaze landing on Ryan one last time. "You think speed is more important than trust. One day, you'll realize you were wrong."